On today's episode of Dance Med Spotlight, I'm speaking with Shane Wuerthner. He's a former professional ballet dancer turned coach obsessed with bridging the gap between classical ballet and modern sports science. After years of dancing internationally, he now helps dancers train smarter, stay healthier, and actually understand why their bodies do what they do. He's the founder of Athletistry, where ballet meets anatomy, strength, and mindset. In today's episode, we talk a lot about anatomy, biomechanics, cross-training, and strength training, how these things can and should maybe be incorporated into the dance studio, technique, corrections that are being given to help dancers not only do what they want to be able to do at the highest level that they can, but making sure that we're doing it in a safe and sustainable way. We also talk a lot about maybe some of the more common corrections that dance educators may provide to dancers that often have been handed down from generation to generation, but maybe lacking a little bit of foundation in anatomy and biomechanics. How do we sort of set the record straight to make sure that any of those corrections and feedback are coming from those strong scientific foundations? We talk about collaborating within the community with folks who are dance medicine specialists, fitness specialists, and vice versa. How do those folks maybe get a better understanding from the dancers and the expertise that dancers have and bring to the table as well? We talk about all of that and so much more, so make sure to listen to the whole episode. Welcome back to another episode of Dance Med Spotlight, where we talk about all things dance medicine and dance science. Today, I'm excited for my guest, Shane Wuerthner. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So my very first question for everybody, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right, so who I am. It's a multifaceted answer, that one. I was a professional ballet dancer for 12 years. My life really was based in the arts for a very long time, from childhood, from 5 years old, when I was put into all different artistic disciplines, from gymnastics to martial arts to musical theater to tap to jazz to ballet to ballroom even. And my career came to a rather sudden end at the age of 30. Unexpectedly, and I moved into becoming a fitness professional, which was like the complete outside of that artistic framework. So it was an interesting jump to go from art and music and that type of movement to very scientific, functional based movement very rapidly in a span of about 4 months, which is the qualification period here in Australia for fitness professional. And the reason why I say it's kind of a multifaceted answer is that now I find myself trying to bridge the gap between those two spaces. So a lot of my my work that I do, even Athletistry, the name Athletistry comes from the combination of athleticism and artistry put together. So that's where that's coming together. And so a lot of who I am now is trying to find those, I guess, those overlaps, if you will, but also the spaces that are missing in each side that we could enhance, and then how to specifically now how to help dancers to understand their work, not just from a visual perspective, but also understanding the reasons why they move, how movement works, how their movement can impact their body over many years, and all things along those lines.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really important thing there of sort of helping bridge the gaps between the two worlds and see how they also can influence one another. Because I find so often, having been a dancer growing up also, and a physical therapist now treating dancers, where we sort of need people to be those translators for each side. Yeah,
definitely, and I'm finding that there's more and more dancers who are moving into that space, especially post-career. It's almost like we feel like there was something missing during our time as dancers, that as much as the artistic side of things was fulfilling and enjoyable and we got something out of it, there were like answers that we all wanted to have that no one had the answer to. right? It was like there were like whispers behind the scenes of like, oh, well, you have to do this stretch and that'll get you better at this, or just do like this exercise over here and that's going to make you stronger for that movement. Or even teachers would come up with their things that maybe their teacher had given them as a student, and this, some exercise that went back maybe 200 years to somebody who created this thing, right? And ballet, especially, my main forte is very steeped in that kind of old world exercise tradition that hasn't necessarily kept up with sports science. So I do find it very interesting to see kind of how those worlds interconnect. And I think a lot of dancers are looking for answers to find and understand, well, why does this work? Why am I not getting results? And what do I need to be doing instead?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that immediately comes to mind as you were saying that is the very, I don't know, it doesn't seem to want to quite go away yet, but the idea of don't do strength training, don't run, don't lift weights, don't, this whole list of don't do these other things to supplement what you're doing in dance. It's going to make you too bulky. It's going to give you the wrong muscles. It's going to, whatever the rationale is.
It's so funny. It's so funny you say that, because there was a post that my wife sent me the other day of a rather major school, I think in the UK, that made exactly that statement. It was like, don't ride horses because it's going to change your legs, or don't go for a run even because your muscles are going to be different. It's like, come on, guys. Like the specificity of training is so minimal, right? Like if you think about it, the way that I think about it is like, if you're a runner, right? Like if you're running multiple days a week and you're doing specific training to become a better runner or a sprinter or a marathon runner, you're going to have physical adaptations that come from that type of training. Yep. Dancers are not running enough to have the running physical adaptation. They're dancing that much. So the running is more like an offset to the amount of dancing they're doing that maybe is going to help them with conditioning. It might help them with some of the muscles that they aren't training when they're always in external rotation, right? So I always kind of, I look at those posts and I'm like, why are we still trying to push this old world idea that if you're going to be a ballet dancer, you can only do ballet in order to get better at that? It doesn't make much sense.
Mm-hmm. Going down that vein, also this idea of dance class is enough. Yeah. It's great for learning technique, for working on some of your form, the aesthetics of it, that sort of thing. But there's definitely pieces that we are missing in dance class, ballet class. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think actually what needs to be said is that we have to look at how what we now look at as ballet class developed, because it wasn't always that. Like if we go back, let's say we go back to like the early 19th century, even before that, like mid 18th century, class they weren't standing at the bar doing exercises. Like it didn't exist that way. They would go into a room with a teacher and they would work on movements that were going to be put into a performance. Mm-hmm. Right. And maybe there was training over many years of working on that, but it wasn't what we now think of as ballet and ballet class. That really developed like from the middle of the 19th century on, looking at dancers like Marie Taglioni, for example, who had like a hunched back, and she had kind of like spinal deformities and things that she struggled with and was very weak in comparison to other dancers at the time. So she would go, and the reason why we dance on point, she would go and she would stand up on her toes to try to develop the strength in her calves and in her legs. And it was more like experimental than it was like, I have a set plan and this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. And then really the father of the ballet class is Enrico Cicchetti. So he came along and he really formulated, these are the exercises, and he put together specific exercises that then, led on to kind of spreading out through the ballet world. And then we had Marius Petipa and Vaganova and all of these other methodologies that then sprung from that, even Balanchine taking his Imperial Russian training and taking that to the United States and developing that as well. Mm-hmm. So what we kind of see as ballet class is it's recent in its development to dance, but it's kind of antiquated in the sense that like we haven't really changed it much since the middle of the 19th century. Mm-hmm. Right. So if we think about that, and then we think, okay, well, how far has sports science come since the middle of the 19th century? Have we had any developments in the understanding of the body and energy systems and
Perhaps.
muscles and anatomy? Maybe just a little bit, right?
Hmm.
And so we look at that and we think, okay, well, the bar structure isn't too bad because we have some rise and some fall, and there's the eccentric element of a fondue, for example, where we're doing very slow knee bends or a plie. And then we have the more fast twitch kind of development that you're going to get from something like a frappe or a dégagé or a grand battement. And so we do have those different elements within the bar work, and all of that is making much sense. But then we look at it and we say, okay, well, what about jumps? Right? Like normally, like the sports science recommendation is going to be put the plyometrics at the beginning of the workout so that you're not exhausted by the time you get to them. Yet we put all of our jumps at the end of class.
Hmm.
Right. And so it's an interesting structure that kind of goes against the mindset of what we would see as modern sports science. And so then it's like, okay, well, if that's all you're doing, the likelihood that you're going to get injured is quite high because you're training your muscles in only one way,
Hmm.
and you're not getting any type of complementary structure to that. We start to see things like the patella deviating off to the side, right? Because the vastus lateralis is overdeveloped in many dancers as opposed to the vastus medialis, and then you start to see things like hip and ankle problems because of the constant external rotation, or you start to see low back problems because of the neutralization of the posture consistently and removing that natural curvature of the spine. So if we're not doing other things, then our physical structure is going to be challenged. But then also, as humans, we need things to be interested in. We're like, and I'm
Yes.
not even talking about dance. Like, go out and ride a bike and see the outside and get outside of the studio every now and then, because
Hmm.
that's going to then inform your art as well. Like it comes back, it all circles around. And if you're not experiencing life, how can you be an artist? It doesn't work.
Yes, definitely. And one of the things I always go back to is this idea of, we are humans first and then dancers. And we need to make sure that we're supporting our human life, and not just the dance life. And that's where I feel like sometimes it tends to break down for folks, because especially when we are even, if we're spending a lot of time dancing broadly across different genres and things, that's already one thing. But then if we are very specialized and we are only doing ballet, or we are only a dancer in modern or whatever, then we're even further streamlining those things that we're doing, and the more balance we need to find in other movement, to help out our human bodies.
Yeah, definitely. It was interesting. I was talking with someone recently, and we were discussing how, well, I was saying how I find that dancers often struggle with the hip hinge movement, especially ballet dancers,
Yes.
because we're not taught to allow our hips to go backwards as we hinge, right? We have to keep our legs and our hips in one straight line and then kind of bend over something. And so, like when I'll get dancers into a gym and I'll start teaching them the deadlift movement, they really struggle with that. Right? They struggle with that hip hinge. They struggle with understanding that actually they can kind of stick their butt out. That's okay. That's actually a natural pattern. And we do train that out of dancers, especially with jumps. Like when you take them and put them in first position, you get them to jump, you're not going to have that natural hip flexion before hip extension into the jump. You're going to get into a kind of knee bend, basically, right? It's all coming from the knees as opposed to a lot of it coming from the hips. So there are things that we just like, we train functional movement out of dancers, and then we wonder, like, why do they have all these injuries? It's like, well, because they're not moving the way that their body is designed to move.
Right. Right. I think another thing that kind of plays into some of this too is not only the movements that we're doing, but some of the things that are still, again, a common part of dance culture of pain is normal. If it doesn't hurt, maybe you're not doing it right. It's normal to have pain with certain things. And maybe not having more discussion about the difference of sort of that productive, like I'm feeling I did something different in my body. Maybe I did a new set of choreography that my muscles are just kind of letting me know it's different, versus something that is a warning sign for us.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic actually, because there's going to be discomfort in
Hmm.
dance. Like you're going to have moments where it doesn't feel right, or the muscles are exerting themselves, and so it quote unquote hurts, right? Like your body kind of feels like that doesn't feel what it should feel like, and over time that pain, you become either more accustomed to it in a way, or kind of your body gets better conditioned, and then you don't feel it the same way. That is
Hmm.
very different to, I have a stabbing pain in my second metatarsal right now that is not allowing me to walk normally, and I'm just going to push through because I have to get through this variation, right? Like those are two very different things. Or my hip, it feels like it's about to collapse on me because I've got hypermobile hips and there's a bit of dysplasia and I don't know what I'm doing, and like ouch, versus yeah, my hips are a bit sore because I had to hold my leg out to the side and it was intense, right?
Hmm.
So there is definitely that difference, and I think it can be very difficult for children to differentiate between this hurts because it's uncomfortable and it's new, versus this hurts because this is an injury and I need to actually stop. And then there's the fear, right? Like the fear that comes out of, if I go up to my teacher and I tell them that I have a problem, are they going to not cast me in the role? Am I not going to get an opportunity? Is it going to set me back X amount of months because someone else is going to get the work that I'm not going to get? Right.
Yes. Yes. And we'll see that at the professional level of maybe I won't have this position in the company anymore. They won't ask me back next season, whatever the case may be. Or for the kids, another one that I hear a lot too, especially if they're coming up to performances or competitions or things like that. I don't want to let the rest of my class down. So I'm just going to push through because I feel bad doing that to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, the issue that I always come back at with this is like, do we really need to have dancers scheduled to the point where they're doing, or maybe not dancing 40 hours a week, but are in the studio 40 hours a week, right? Like I can understand the need for rehearsals and the need for class time and the need to get a lot of stuff done. But even in my time, like when I was studying and I was at a prestigious school, I was at the Kirov Academy of Ballet in Washington, D.C. I never danced more than 25 hours a week. And
Mhm.
this was a ballet high school. We were in class and we were working intensively. But even at that, if we had a 4-hour ballet class, we'd have a half an hour break in there. We'd have moments where we weren't working. For example, maybe it was a repertoire part of the class, and you were on the side and kind of just like practicing what you were doing. It wasn't intensive work for 25 hours a week. It was, we had 25 hours scheduled and we did what we needed to do in that time, right? Now I'm seeing some schools where kids are there from 8:45 in the morning until 8:45 at night, and they have 2 hours for schoolwork in the middle of the day, and they're doing all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't even work that hard as a professional. Is this really necessary to be doing to children?
Mhm.
So there's that. And then those same children will go on to social media, for example, and they'll see someone like me or someone who's out there advocating for cross training or for going to the gym or weight training. And they're like, when do I fit this in? When do I actually get into the
Right?
gym and do this? Because all of my life is spent at the studio. I don't have time to strength train. And
Mhm.
so the answer then becomes usually from the dance studio, oh, we'll add a strength and conditioning class. Right. And that strength and conditioning class often is not taught by someone who's qualified to teach a strength and conditioning class, first of
Yep.
all. And second of all, is usually ends up being stretching or some sort of body weight, high rep, low weight exercise that is going to then further the impact of doing too much movement, right? Like if we're thinking, okay, if I want
Mhm.
to increase strength, it's not going to be doing 25 reps of a squat necessarily. It's going to be, let's do 5 reps of a squat with a heavy weight that's challenging on the body, and then let's rest for like 4 minutes, right? Like let's take a rest and let's like let your nervous system recover a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's really just, it's like one of these things. I just think like, why are we not reducing the dance workload so that they can actually build the skills, but then also keep their bodies healthy so they can stay in the studio longer, year wise, like months and years and decades, so that they actually
Right.
have time to perfect their art.
Yeah. And I think it's so often some of the dancers that maybe stand out at a studio are the ones who are putting in a lot of time. They're doing all the private lessons, they're doing who knows what all, and they are performing very well right now. But what the dancers who are seeing that don't see is maybe that dancer is getting burnt out. Maybe they're pushing through a bunch of stuff in their body and things that doesn't feel good and all of that. And their career might not have the longevity because they're using it all up right now and not doing some of the cross training and things like that. And it's hard, I think, especially for younger dancers to see that and recognize that of like, oh, well, what is this actually going to look like down the road? And they're just seeing the dancer who's maybe being praised and stands out in some way. And I think that's part of what can be challenging for them to try to navigate and make sense of too.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, if you're seeing someone and they're doing heaps of private lessons and extra coaching and all these classes, and they're the ones that are getting the praise and the results and the outcome, then obviously it looks like, well, that's what has to happen in order to get there. Right. But it's kind of like in fitness. It's like, okay, well, you'll go on and you'll see, oh, this person has 6-pack abs and massive pecs and big biceps. And yeah, they look like they're really strong, but then you see them in the gym and they're not lifting a lot of weight. And it's usually because they've done a massive amount of hypertrophy training specifically to look like that. Right. Yeah. So could they functionally move properly? Are they able to even stretch? Are they able to lift their arms properly? Can they bring a toothbrush to their mouth? Like, is that possible for them, or have they specifically designed themselves to look this way? And so it's like, okay, well, this dancer maybe has figured out a way to function at a very high level in this very specific environment that they've been put into. But is that going to translate to a professional career? Are they going to be able to take now that workload that they've put in maybe for the last 10 years and they're 15, right? Like, I'm not talking like even they're 25. They've been putting this in for the last 10 years. They're 15 years old. Their body is already showing signs of injury that we wouldn't expect until maybe 30, 35 with that type of workload. And now you're going to try and send them out into a professional career. Like, what are we doing? They're broken before they even get to that point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think, kind of going back to what we were talking about before also is this idea of incorporating strength training, cross training, how dancers can fit that into their schedule and not feel like it's conflicting with class, rehearsal, any of those kinds of things. Something that I sometimes still see, although it seems to be getting better, is also the idea of exercise in class being used as punishment, where it's like, well, you weren't following instructions. Now you need to run. Now you need to go do push-ups. And that's the only time that we really see some of this other kind of exercise in class or in the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like that sometimes like even I will use it as a joke. It's like, okay, well, you got to do burpees or whatever. Right. But it's, I will never actually make them do it. Like I'll say like, guys, you're late, like 10 burpees. And then they'll all like look at me. I'm like, I'm just kidding, guys. We're not going to do that. Right. But yeah, it is one of those things where it's like, we don't see the value of exercise if it's not dance. In the dance space, right? We look at it and we think, well, that's superfluous. It's a waste of time. But then on the same token, we'll take dance movements, remove them from dance, add a band or a fit ball or something to them, put them on the floor and call it exercise and say, this is what's going to get you better at dance. It's like, well, why are we doing that? Like if you're going to do that, then take that time and actually pick up a weight or go for a run or do something that is going to cross train, not just continue to bash the same body in the same movement patterns over and over again with a little bit of added resistance that isn't going to have an impact long term. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, we see things like I don't know, like people will lie down on the floor and they'll go into a glute bridge on a Bosu ball or a fit ball, and then do like plies on the Bosu ball or a fit ball with their hips up. And I've watched it. I'm just like, what about the impact that we're putting on the cervical spine? What about the lack of postural awareness of the back? And it's like, why are we doing this to especially children in large group classes where they don't have one-on-one attention to be able to work on those specific movement patterns properly? Yes. And then saying, okay, well, you don't have time for exercise, but let's do a 45-minute class doing this. and then go do your ballet class. It's like, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that makes me think of, I think, again, I see this more with kids that I work with than adults, but definitely still see it in adults. In group classes in particular, you can't get one-on-one direct feedback for all the things. There's too much going on, too many people. And so sometimes corrections are given, whether it's to an individual or to just sort of the class as a whole, that the dancer then has difficulty interpreting what the heck is it that you actually want me to do. And that's often something that they come to me with too, of like, my teacher keeps telling me this, but I don't actually know what that means. And I thought I fixed it, but I keep getting the correction.
Yeah. Yeah, I made a post yesterday. What I think the question was like, what are the corrections that are still confusing you in class? And I have like, I don't know, it's got like 800 comments on it. Comments. It's ridiculous.
Sounds
But
right.
the ones that always come up, right? Like close your rib cage, relax your quadriceps and your hip flexors when you lift your leg, use your back to lift your arms, you know, those are kind of like the three that always tend to hit the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand there's kind of like this idea in dance, and this is a very old idea, that we don't teach the anatomy of the movement, as in like you don't say, okay, well now you're going to use your quadriceps to stretch your knee, and then your hip flexor is going to engage, and your deep rotators are now going to do this, and that's going to then cause this rotation. And then like it's a very old kind of thought process that doing that takes away from the actual flow of the movement, because then the dancer starts to hyper focus on certain elements of their body as opposed to thinking about the movement as a whole. So they're breaking it down into all this minutia. It's like when you get into a car, you don't think, okay, well now the axle is going to start to turn and then the end of the pistons are going to fire, and like it doesn't happen that way. You turn it on and you go, right? That being said, what also happens in the dance world is we give these corrections that kind of fly in the face of anatomical structure. So we'll say like, lift your leg from behind. And it's like, okay, I have muscles on the back of my leg. What are those muscles? And then you start to kind of try and analyze the correction. You start thinking, oh, well, the back of my leg is my hamstring. So my hamstring must be lifting my leg. Right. And then what happens sometimes is teachers will think, oh, well, I have to explain this correction that I received from a teacher that I don't fully understand, but I'm giving it anyway because it's passed down generationally. And so I'm going to give this correction, but then I'm going to try and explain it to them. And I'm going to say, well, because the hamstrings are on the back of the leg, that's what's going to lift your leg. And so then you get these dancers who are like, I've been trying to lift my leg with my hamstrings and it just won't go up. I don't know what's going on. Why is this not happening? So it kind of permeates. And I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think it's just like, this is what happens in the space, because we have, again, that old class structure from way back that's been kind of passed down. And it's been master to apprentice for a very long time, until probably 50 years ago when it became very widespread, kind of standardized, right? And now everybody goes to a ballet class, and anyone who's been a ballet dancer tries to teach, because we have to have some sort of, career progression after the career that left us not being able to do much else, because our whole life was dedicated to that focus. So we then go out into teach, and unless you've done some sort of study on the body or how anatomy impacts muscle movement and even energy systems or biomechanical function, fascia, all of this stuff that we need to know to really understand how the body works. It doesn't mean that your students need to know all this information. It just means that you need to be able to explain it in a way that isn't going to confuse them, because that's what ends up happening. Everyone ends up confused.
Yes, most definitely. I remember probably a couple of years ago now, I was actually doing a presentation at a teachers training thing for dance teachers. And we were talking about, I think it was like the rotators of the hip and some different things, and how to really cue and what the anatomy is, and really getting into kind of the nitty gritty stuff of this. And it was shocking to me how many of the teachers in this room had never figured out, like, oh, that's what that's supposed to feel like. Or, and they've been teaching for however many years, and we had to get into such detail and individual practice and correction and that sort of thing. And they go, I don't know, I've just been doing it. And especially the teachers where some of the movements maybe became or came a little more naturally to them. Maybe they were somebody who already was a bit hypermobile. So getting into turnout was a bit easier than someone who really had to fight for it. And so it was really eye-opening for me being in a room of so many teachers and going through that process together. But I think also for them of like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be giving cues on for the dancers, especially if they're struggling and that sort of thing. It was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is always fascinating. Like I remember I was teaching something at one point and I was saying like, while yes, we do want to be engaging the adductors and using that together. If you think about it, what's actually coming together in a tendu in first position, it's not your adductors because your adductors are facing the front now. It's actually the
Mhm.
hamstrings. The hamstrings are coming back together, right? So they were like they had been cueing their students, use your adductors to close your legs, and while that is happening, your hamstrings are also part of that process. And they hadn't been saying anything about that. And I remember one teacher looking at me saying, I'd never even thought of it that way. And I was like, well, in external rotation, your adductors are going to be facing that way. They're not coming back together this way. And while it
Mhm.
is adduction to a certain degree, it's adduction externally rotated, which adds a level of complication to the movement.
Yes. Yeah, and that's something where, like, I know for myself, going to school to become a physical therapist, we talk about anatomy and biomechanics and, how do we help people after knee replacements and all of these different things. But we never talked about, well, what about people who need to be in greater ranges of motion? These aesthetic athletes, flexible athletes, hyper mobile folks, whatever the case may be. And so much of my own development in working with dancers has been okay, so now I know the dance part because I've been a dancer my whole life. And I know the PT part, but how am I putting those pieces together to now understand? Okay, yeah, in school, we're talking about if someone can get to sort of like a dégagé type position, that's really good. Dancers do way more than that all the time. And so the mechanics have totally changed.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also interesting when we start to see um, kind of the old world ballet from, let's say, 1940s, 1950s, where legs really didn't
Mhm.
go above 90 degrees.
Yep.
Um, Rotation was maybe a little bit more limited. We didn't have as many hypermobile dancers in the space because they were actually selected out, right? But a lot of hypermobile dancers were not allowed to dance because it was considered to be too dangerous for them.
Mhm.
To where we are now, where legs are up by the ears and rotation is extreme. And if you're not able to do those things, you're not selected, right? Like it's kind of gone in the opposite direction of where it used to be. Even if you look at the physical structure of dancers from the 1950s, and you look at any Soviet dancer from the 1950s, they're strong, they're solid, they've got a good structure to their body, and you look
Mhm.
at them now and they look like they could be broken by a floating breeze from the just the shape of their body. And lots of hypermobility and lots of even in the work that I've been doing, I've had quite a few students who have Ehlers-Danlos.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because back in 2020 I opened like an adult ballet studio. And one of the students that my wife had been working with no longer wanted to go to the studio that he was at and wanted to come and do kind of a more personalized training with me. And when he started to work with me, his mother came in and said, "Well, you need to know this about my son. He's got Ehlers-Danlos, and it's like all of the family has it, and like we've been through studies and all this stuff. And here's a book. Like, go read it because this is all the information I can give you on Ehlers-Danlos." And it was kind of like this
Yeah.
eye-opening thing where suddenly I was like, okay, there's a whole medical side to this that as dance teachers we're not aware of, right? And a lot of dance teachers still don't even know that hypermobility disorders and Ehlers-Danlos are a thing. And then they're looking at it and saying, "Wow, look at her feet, look at her knees, look at what she can do."
Right.
Meanwhile, not understanding that there's maybe underlying structural issues or digestive issues or heart issues or functional issues that are going to lead to more um, dislocations of knees and ankles and hips and even elbows and shoulders, right?
Mhm.
And so they're going into a classroom not even really prepared to be working with the body they're working with because they don't have the knowledge of how to handle that physique, and then pushing them to the extreme because that's what the art is demanding now. And then we're ending up with this situation where the dancer is injured. The teacher doesn't know any better. So it's not like you can't blame them for that necessarily. But it's like, how do we bridge that gap? We need to have, I think, more education around these things so that teachers know. Like, I wouldn't have known had I not had that interaction with the mother who said, this is what you need to know.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I think that brings up a good question of, what before I even go to the question, I think kind of setting the scene a little bit of, I think historically, sometimes there has been some distrust of people in medical or fitness realms or that kind of thing of like, well, you're just going to tell us not to dance. You're going to tell us to lift these weights that are going to make us bulky, whatever the story might be. And on the flip side, a lot of clinicians who maybe don't understand dance and the culture and the aesthetics and some of the expectations that are there. And so, how do we start to be better collaborators with one another in both directions to make sure that we're supporting dancers to be healthy while being able to perform at whatever level they want or need to perform at?
Yeah, I think that's really it. That's the goal, is to get those kind of two parallel lanes that we're both traveling in, saying like, well, we want to make sure they're healthy, well, we want to make sure they can dance, and like come together, merge together into one lane a little bit. I think we're seeing that happen in some capacity anyway, because you're getting a lot of dancers who are retiring and moving into the health space because they didn't feel healthy as dancers, and so they're moving into that space to then try to make the health space more appropriate for dancers. You're also starting to see a lot of the kind of old guard of the dance world retire or move out of dance, and so the newer generations are going to come in and be like, well, actually, we can make this a healthier space, we can do this better. And there are ways that we can make sure that we're not hyper specializing before the age of 12, where we're not pushing them to do more than 15 hours a week before the age of 15, where we're making sure that they're doing what's necessary for their bodies to be able to have their career, but then also keep them healthy and keep them safe and keep them alive. As far as like, what do we need to do to bridge that gap? I mean, we've got some fantastic organizations like iAtoms and things that are definitely promoting that. Yes. I think what tends to happen, and this kind of was brought to my attention last year. I was presenting at a conference where we were talking about professional spheres, professional pathways for dancers, and one of the a lot of the attendees were educators in the school space, so like traditional schools who have dance programs, as opposed to dance schools that teach dance only. And what they were saying was that a lot of the funding that they were getting was not going to dance, because the government had determined, well, dance is not a career pathway that is going to be fruitful, so it doesn't make sense for us to put money into that when we can put money into coding or into engineering or something that's going to actually have a benefit to where we're seeing society going. And so I think what ends up happening is you get dancers who leave school very early to pursue dance, or who do some sort of distance education to train, and then oftentimes by the time they've finished their dance career, they don't have a college credential generally. Like, if we're talking about especially ballet companies, there are a few obviously that do offer that, but it's very rare. San Francisco Ballet is actually a really good example of a company that helps their dancers to get a college degree. And many of them then go on to have business degrees and whatnot outside of that. But what ends up happening is the dancers then feel like, well, all I have is dance. I'm not academic because I didn't really do academics in school. What am I going to do now? Well, I'll just go and teach. And it's scary to sit in a room with someone who is very highly educated in the medical space, or is a physical therapist, or has gone through multiple years of training in that space, because we don't necessarily know that space. Like, we don't know health and medicine. And I think sometimes dancers feel like, well, we're very highly educated in our field. Like, we know all about how a tendu works and a plie works and all of these things, but it's not seen sometimes with the same level of respect that the medical space is seen, right?
Yeah.
And so then what ends up happening is sometimes you'll have the medical space be condescending towards the dance space and be like, well, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You haven't had the training that we've had in the body and all this stuff. And so I think what ends up happening is you just end up having this kind of battle between both sides, where the dance teachers are like, well, I know my field. They don't know it. They didn't go and study for years in dance. And the dancers, the doctors are then like, well, they don't have a medical degree. They don't know the body. They don't know how this stuff works. And so you just get kind of like this head coming together like this, instead of saying, well, okay, you understand how a plie works. I understand how the knees function. Like, let's work together and make this come together.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's always interesting to me because we have so much that each would be able to learn from one another if we could just kind of set our egos aside and come in and have some of those conversations and opportunities for things. And I think there's some organizations, whether that is, conferences and things like that, or even within some of the dance schools and companies that are better at that than others. And then I think also, even just within the dance world, or as we're looking at some of the genres, there can be a lot of, ballet is the foundation of everything and you must train in ballet for everything else. And then other folks who are like, well, but no, there are dance styles that aren't based in ballet. Or like, I also do social dancing, West Coast swing. I've trained in salsa. I've done a lot of different styles, and just kind of hearing in the different circles of like, well, ours is better because no, we all just do different things. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. I've started a little series on my reels where I'll do like walking as different types of dancers, and one of the requests that keeps coming up is hip hop, and I'm not trained in hip hop at all. I butcher it every time I try. Like, it's not me. But I tried it this morning, and then I was like, ballet. So I put on as the caption, I was like, ballet dancer trying hip hop walks, right? Like, just to clear the air. And like ballet and hip hop, while a hip hop dancer who takes some ballet classes may develop some more grace, and a ballet dancer who takes some hip hop classes may develop some more grounded feeling and some more kind of like aggression in their dancing, potentially even. They are very different forms. They came from very different backgrounds, and neither one necessarily has to impact the other if you don't want it to. Like, you can train as a hip hop dancer and do ballet, and both will help you if you want to go down that path. But you don't have to do ballet to become better at hip hop. It's not necessary, and nor do you have to do hip hop to become better at ballet.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about some of the training technique ways that we can approach those things. What about the dancer who comes in and maybe they've been doing ballet for a bit, and then they just sort of come to this conclusion of, my body's not built for ballet? Mm-hmm. What is your gut reaction to that first?
It's a hard discussion to have, because the reality, there's a reality and an ideal. Right. The ideal is that everyone will have the opportunity to dance professionally as a ballet dancer if they've trained at it. Right. That there's going to be some place for everyone. The reality is much different to that. It's not that case, unfortunately. And we can place blame in different areas. We can say, oh, well, there's not enough funding in the arts to have enough companies for people to dance, or there's not enough companies then to create that space, or companies are too restrictive with their body types. But the reality is that most dancers will not end up having a professional career in ballet, even though they've trained for it, right? Like, I often, when this conversation comes up, I will often look at the numbers just purely from the Kirov Academy where I trained. So when I went to the Kirov, I first started by going to the summer program. The year that I auditioned for the summer program, there were 3,000 dancers across the United States that auditioned for that program. 125 students attended the summer program from those 3,000 kids. Right? Of the 125 kids that went to the summer program, 3 students were offered a place at the year-round program. Right? I was in a graduating class of 24 students, which was the largest graduating class in the history of the school. And of that graduating class, I think 5 of us ended up dancing professionally. And of those 5, I think 3 of us lasted beyond the quarter ballet. And
Mhm.
I think only one of them is still dancing. Right. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, okay, we went from 3,000 down to 1 across 25 years, 20 years. Right. But that's just one year. How many
Mhm.
dancers went to other schools, got cut from other spaces, went into looking at those things. Right. So it is a very, very elite space to be able to have a professional outcome. Right.
Yes.
And it's not like, for example, you can say, okay, well, I'm in a ballet company now in San Francisco and I want to change companies. You can't just like walk down the road to the next ballet company, right?
Right.
You're either going to be going to a much smaller company in the same city, or you're going to be changing to a different company.
Mhm.
So that's one challenge. And if the body is already fighting you, so let's say you're coming into class every day and you're struggling because you just don't have the turnout, or you don't have the flexibility, or you feel like your feet are never going to point. What I would first say to that dancer is like, look, here are 30 dancers I can show you that don't have perfect feet, don't have high extensions, don't have flat turnout, have scoliosis, have all kinds of problems. Like look at these people who do not fall into the mold, and figure out what they have that maybe you have from an artistic perspective, or an ability to tell a story, or an ability to perform, that you would love about ballet that isn't related to your physicality. What is it about? Why are you here, first of all? Like why did you come into the studio in the first place? When you were 3 years old and you came in and you wanted to be a fairy or a mermaid or a princess, and you danced
Mhm.
around the studio and you had this smile on your face every time you left class, to now where you're like, my body just isn't there, what do I do?
Yeah.
Right. And is there a saving grace? First of all, is there something that you can find within yourself to bring joy back into your movement? Or is it going to be so hard for you to keep going that you're just going to be miserable? Because that's really what it comes down to. It's not
Mhm.
about your body. It's, are you going to be able to push past your challenges and move forward? Or are those challenges going to restrict you to the point that you hate your life? Right.
Right.
Because it's not worth it. Like if you're in there and you're bashing yourself every day to try and get the thing that you love, and it just keeps smacking you in the face, it's an abusive relationship.
Mhm.
And it doesn't make sense to stay in that abusive relationship.
Yes.
Right. But if you're in there and you're like, you know what, my body is fighting me and this is really hard, but when I go and I dance, I just feel this joy and this love. Like when I actually get to go through my solos and I go through and I take class and I relax into that first plie, and it just feels like joy. I may not have the straightest knees or the pointiest feet or the highest extensions, but like this is what I live for. Then keep going. Don't stop. Don't stop because you don't have the physicality for it. Keep going,
Mhm.
because there will be some space that you can move into that you will be able to continue doing what you're doing.
Yes.
If it is painful and you're bashing yourself over the head every day, it's not worth it.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think that's also where finding people who can help you navigate through some of that is so important. I know for myself growing up, I was never a flexible dancer. I always like to half jokingly, but I think also the truth. When I was 9, I had my splits for like a week and then they disappeared and they never came back again. And that was just how I was as a dancer. But then I got a little bit older and we had a guest instructor for like a summer master class or something like that. And through that master class, he had given the opportunity for anyone to try any movements. So even if they were jumps and sequences that were more traditionally the male role, he let any of the females in the class do. And
Yeah.
that's when I discovered I have a lot of power,
Yeah.
but I had never known that before. And so that became kind of my thing of like, yeah, I'm the strong one. I'm not the flexible one. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And I found that in that master class, but sometimes that's what I'm helping my clients, my patients with of like, okay, so maybe your hip flexibility isn't great, but hey, what if we really help you with your turns? And that's what you're really good at. And
Yeah.
that's what I enjoy doing, helping them figure that out. But they often need somebody to kind of help discover some of that for themselves too.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the other thing that, you know, we're as teachers, as educators, we're guides to these students who are professing to want to have that career, that outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't, even if they just enjoy dance and they want to dance, and we're still there to help them to find the movement and to find that passion in what they're doing. I think sometimes we pigeonhole in the arts because we think, oh, well, this is just easier. If I just put this person in this box over here, they'll sit in that space and that's what they'll do. But even in that, like sometimes teaching can become very restrictive. It's like oftentimes I'll go into a class and I'll say, girls, just do however many turns you can do. Like
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what you can, like, don't hold back for me. Don't think about how perfect the technique is today. Like, don't worry about whether you fall out of the turn. If you fall bigger. Like, let's see what happens when you fail, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to go through that process. At some point you are going to fall on the floor. And if you're always too afraid to feel what that feels like, when it does happen, the shock is just going to be so massive that it's going to throw you for a loop, or maybe you will actually get injured.
Right.
And so if you're going to fail, at least fail in a space that is safe for you to have that failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll work with them. I'll be like, okay, well, like, let's just get past this fear, because they're pigeonholes. Like, don't do that. Don't put your shoulders back. Don't do this. Don't do that. They're always told what not to do, as opposed to like letting them kind of explore and experiment through the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you learned that you were powerful and you had that ability to jump. I often also think that we specialize too soon, right? Like if you think, okay, you're taking a child who's maybe 9 or 10 years old and you're putting them into point classes, how are their feet now developing differently to a boy who's being told to go and jump for 30 minutes at the end of class?
Yeah.
Right? Because their feet are actually structurally going to be slightly different, right? There's going to be different muscle development. There's going to be different ways that they take off from the ground based on how they're working either in the point shoe or the flat shoe.
Definitely.
And that's not to say that we don't need to start at a young-ish age with point, but then also give the girls the same amount of time with jumps.
Yes.
You know, don't take the point away. Don't take the jumps away when they're still learning how to develop that functional movement. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then also for boys, if boys look, I don't know that boys need to dance on point, although that is something that is coming more and more now in society, that we're seeing more choreographers request this. So it is probably a skill that boys will need to start to develop now.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also need to start to create point shoes that aren't just pink satin, you know, so that the boy in the room who maybe wants to try that doesn't feel put off by the pink satin, right? Yeah. So kind of expand it so that it's not just this goes for this person and this goes for this person, this goes for this person, but that we can actually have multiple different pathways for dancers to work with. I mean, I love what Able to Act is doing with their modular point shoes. And I would go out and get a pair, but they don't make them for my foot size.
See, another opportunity right there. Yes. Yeah. And I think with what you're talking about of like giving dancers opportunities to sort of test their boundaries, try different movements, try, the things that maybe haven't been as traditional as part of class or as a movement option or that kind of thing. I think sometimes it can be challenging for the dancers to kind of figure out, well, if my teacher or choreographer or whomever isn't giving me those opportunities, how can I advocate for myself and find opportunities like that to be able to explore some of that? On every episode of Dance Med Spotlight, we have the final bow, essentially the take-home message. We've talked about a lot of different things today. What's something, or maybe a couple of some things, that you hope people walk away with after listening to this episode?
Yeah. Well, I think the main one, what we just touched on, it's like find your space, find your people that are going to support you, and they will come from all different disciplines. It will not just be your dance teacher, although that may be your first point of contact. If your dance teacher is restricting you from reaching out to a personal trainer or a physical therapist, or even any type of allied health professional that may be able to help you to become better at your form, then you have to wonder, like, okay, well, does this person actually have my best interest at heart or not?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it is not just one person that takes dancers through anymore. It is a team, right? And the pathway is very intense, and the process is long, and we need to have those people that will support us along that pathway there in our back corner, to help us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the main thing. From there, I think, don't be afraid to explore the world outside of dance, right? Because again, what are we doing in dance? When we go on stage and we perform with music, and even if we just take the classical ballets, for example, we're telling stories. We're telling stories that are, because of the fact that they have lasted for as long as they have, they are now tales as old as time in that sense, right? Like, there's stories of love and betrayal and princesses and even historical figures that have had difficult lives that we're now showing on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have not experienced life, your performance will not have the depth necessary to portray that to your audience. You won't be able to tell that story to the people who are watching. You won't know how pain feels to be able to show that to your audience. You won't know what elation feels like to show that to your audience. You won't know what love feels like to show that to your audience. And it's often why principal dancers are not 18 years old. They're closer to 30 to 35, because they've gone out and they've lived life and they've had heartbreak and they've lost jobs and they've lost loved ones, and things have happened to them in their life that allows them to draw on that to show to their audience.
Yeah.
So I think you only have one childhood. You only have one opportunity to go to birthday parties and have fun with your friends on the weekend and see movies and read books and play video games. If you're not doing any of that stuff and your life is completely surrounded by a studio with four walls, a mirror, and a bar, then how are you going to be able to portray and tell a story to your audience, right? Reading. I mean, the amount of times I say to my students, like, what book are you reading?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because how can you tell stories if you don't read stories? Right? How
Yeah.
can you know the timing for how to get a story arc across? How can you portray that to somebody else? How can you say, oh, look, this is what happened and this is how it progressed through movement, if you don't know what that looks like and what that feels like and what that timing even is to be able to do that? So
Mm-hmm.
I think exploring the world outside of dance is a huge thing, and that can include lifting weights, that can include doing, going for a swim or horseback riding or running or doing any number of things that you want to do, because it will make you a more well-rounded human, and you will be more relatable when you do enter into the stage to present that to an audience who wants to see that.
Yes. I love that. Last and certainly not least, we have the shameless plug. Exactly what it sounds like. This is your opportunity to promote anything that you have going on, any organization, whatever the case may be. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So, well, look, you can find me at Athletistry on pretty much every platform except for YouTube, where I'm at Athletistry Official. The big thing that I'm working on in 2026 is workshops. So I'm no longer fully affiliated with any schools, and I'm going to be traveling around and delivering workshops, because one of the things that I realized was that while private lessons are good and working with students in a school is good, it doesn't allow me to get the message out to a wide audience, but also in person. Because you can say something on a reel and someone will watch, oh yeah, that looks like a cool tip, and then it goes away. But when you have 3 days with somebody and like you can have a little bit more hands-on impact and actually work with the exercises with them and help them to develop that, it has a much more impactful outcome. And then that message goes farther and wider, and people get that in a more deep way. So athletistry.au/workshops is where all of my workshops are listed. I got a big one in July. I'm coming to Vancouver, so big trip for me coming from Australia, but it should be a lot of fun.
Amazing. Well, Shane, thank you so much for joining me today. This was great getting to chat with you.
Great to chat with you as well.
Dance Med Spotlight is hosted and produced by Alyssa Arms. We discuss all things dance medicine. This has been another episode from Dance Med Spotlight. The Dance Med Spotlight is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present.